"Mr. Jackson," he said, "do you have a comment?" My face was totally red. I said, "No, sir." Mr. Bruner pointed to one of the pictures on the steel. "Perhaps you'd like to tell us what this picture represents." I looked at the carving and felt a flush of relief because I actually recognized it. "That's Kronos eating his kids, right?" "Yes," Mr. Bruner said, obviously not satisfied. "And he did this because—" Well, I racked my brain trying to remember. Kronos was king god and— "God?" Mr. Bruner asked. "Titan," I corrected myself. "And he didn't trust his kids, who were gods. So, Kronos ate them, right? But his wife hid baby Zeus and gave Kronos a rock to eat instead. And later, when Zeus grew up, he tricked his dad Kronos into barfing up his brothers and sisters." "Ew!" said one of the girls behind me. "And so there was this big fight between the gods and the Titans," I continued, "and the gods won." Some snickers from the group. Behind me, Nancy Bubba Fett mumbled to a friend, "Like we're ever going to use this in real life? Like it's going to say on our job applications, please explain why Kronos ate his kids?" "And why, Mr. Jackson," Bruner said, to paraphrase Miss Bobba Fett's excellent question, "why does this matter in real life?" "Busted," Grover muttered. "Shut up," Nancy hissed, her face even brighter red than her hair. At least Nancy got packed, too. Mr. Bruner was the only one who ever caught her saying anything wrong. He had radar ears. I thought about the question and shrugged. "I don't know, sir." "I see." Mr. Bruner looked disappointed. "Well, half credit, Mr. Jackson. Zeus didn't feed Kronos a mixture of mustard and wine, which made him disgorge his other 5 children, who, of course, being immortal gods, had been living and growing up completely undigested in the Titan's stomach. The gods defeated their father, sliced him into pieces with his own sai, and scattered his remains into Tartarus, the darkest part of the underworld. On that happy note, it's time for lunch. Miss Dodds, would you lead us back outside?" The class drifted off, the girls holding their stomachs, the guys pushing each other around and acting like doofuses. Grover and I were about to follow when Mr. Bruner said, "Mr. Jackson." I knew it was coming. I told Grover to keep going, and then I turned to Mr. Bruner. "Sir?" Mr. Bruner had this look that wouldn't let you go. Intense brown eyes that could have been 1,000 years old and seen everything. "You must learn to answer to my question," Mr. Bruner told me. "About the Titans? About life, and how your studies apply to it." "Oh?" "What you learn from me," he said, "is vitally important. I expect you to treat it as such. I'll accept only the best from you, Percy Jackson." I wanted to be angry. This guy pushed me so hard. I mean, sure, it was kind of cool on tournament days when he dressed up in a suit of Roman armor and shouted, "What ho!" and challenged us, sword point against chalk, to run the board in every named Greek and Roman person who had ever lived, their mother, and what god they worshipped. But Mr. Bruner expected me to be as good as anybody else. This despite the fact that I had dyslexia and attention deficit disorder. I had never made above a C- in my life. No, he didn't expect me to be as good. He expected me to be better. And I just couldn't learn all those names and facts, much less spell them correctly. I mumbled something about trying harder, while Mr. Bruner took out one long sad look at the steel that like he'd been at the girl's funeral or something. He told me to go outside and eat my lunch. The class gathered on the front steps of the museum, where we could watch the foot traffic along Fifth Avenue. Overhead, a huge storm was brewing, with clouds blacker than I'd ever seen over the city. I figured maybe it was global warming or something, but the weather all across New York State had been this way since Christmas. We'd had massive snowstorms, flooding, wildfires, from lightning strikes and everything. I wouldn't have been surprised if this was a hurricane blowing in. Nobody else seemed to notice. Some of the guys were pelting pigeons with their Lunchable crackers. Nancy Bubba Fett was trying to pickpocket something from a lady's purse, and of course, Miss Dodds wasn't seeing a thing. Grover and I sat on the edge of the fountain, away from the others. We thought that maybe if we did that, everybody wouldn't know we were from that school, the school for loser freaks who couldn't make it elsewhere. "Detention?" Grover asked. "Nah," I said, "not from Mr. Bruner. I just wish he'd lay off me sometimes. I mean, I'm not a genius." Grover didn't say anything for a while. Then, when I thought he was going to give me some deep physiological comment to make me feel better, he said, "Can I have your apple?" I didn't have much of an appetite, so I let him take it. I watched the stream of cabs going down Fifth Avenue, and thought about my mom's apartment only a little ways uptown from where we sat. I hadn't seen her since Christmas. I wanted so bad to jump in a taxi and head home. She'd hug me and be glad to see me, but she'd be disappointed too. She'd send me right back to Yancey, remind me that I had to try harder even if this was my 6th school in 6 years, and I was probably going to get kicked out again. I wouldn't be able to stand the sad look that she'd give me.